What's going on, guys? We are back with another video, and today's video we just hit 10,000 miles in the ZR2. So I'm going to go over the good, the bad, and the issues we've had with the truck. So let's dive right into it. So how we've gotten these 10,000 miles in about 6 months has been primarily on our overland trips and off-roading it. This truck is not daily driven whatsoever, so these 10,000 miles have been using it to and from trips, and a lot of the miles have been pretty aggressive for the amount of off-roading that we've done with it. Going into the good things about this truck, starting off with the motor here, the 2.7 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder motor here has been fantastic. I know most people, when they hear the amount of cylinders for in a mid-sized truck, they run the other way, but the reality is majority of the market is using 4-cylinder turbocharged engines, but you don't even notice that it's a 4-cylinder motor by the amount of torque this thing puts out. Even with all the additional weight that we've put on this truck with the topper, our build out in the bed, and going up to 35s, this truck still moves off-roading. It still climbs things. It's even at elevation. When we were recently in the San Juan Mountains out in Colorado at 13,000 feet, this truck had absolutely no issues climbing those rocks and climbing at that elevation. So I still think this motor is still a fantastic option. Another positive thing that this truck does is the multimatic suspension. After 10,000 miles, the suspension has been fantastic. We've done obviously on-road, driving to and from. It's very well mannered on-road, and then in the off-road aspect, it does everything you ask it to do. It does washboard roads very well. You can do it at high speed. Sand, it's very well behaved. Even when you throw some serious off-roading at it, some rock crawling, it still is very compliant. And even jumping the truck, which we have, even how you see it fully kitted out with the topper and all, we've jumped it, and it's still very well behaved on, even with all the additional weight. So that's one thing that I think Chevy nailed on the head. Another positive this truck does very well after 10,000 miles is obviously off-roading. Now, obviously that part of it is due to the suspension, but it's not only the suspension. The front and rear lockers are both fantastic. They're super responsive. As soon as you hit that button, they are locked. There is no delay or, oh, you need to roll forward, roll backwards. Both of them unlock and lock with ease at the push of a button. The power delivery from this motor and the transmission is very smooth and linear. It's very predictable. It's not, even with it being turboed, it's not jumping or jittery when you're in that slow, meticulous rock crawling stuff. It's very predictable. And overall, even in stock form, before we put the bigger tires and a slight suspension lift on it, this truck is crazy capable. And if you don't believe me, go check out literally all our other videos off-roading, and you'll be surprised what this thing can do. Going into the cons of this truck after 10,000 miles is, might not seem like much to most people, but it is kind of a pet peeve of mine, is there's no sunglass holder in this truck, and there's no garage door opener, like a built-in garage door opener. I feel like this is huge. This is a 2023. Why can't we integrate one of those garage door openers either up here or the little ones that are on the sun visors? I think that's a huge miss by Chevy, and same thing with incorporating some type of sunglass holder, because oftentimes I was throwing them around until I found a solution. So I found a little tray, replacement tray that replaces this tray here. And essentially it has a slot back here for your sunglasses. It has like a little holder there, and it holds your sunglasses perfectly in place. So that's a little solution. It's like 13, 14 bucks on Amazon. I'll link it down in the description below. That's been my solution for the sunglass holder. Another con on the interior is there is no physical traction control button. Obviously, if you're out off-roading and you find some sand and you want to do some donuts or get a little bit of sideways, little drifting in the sand and dirt, you can't do that with traction control on. And unfortunately, there's no physical traction control button to simply easily turn it off. And I feel like that's a big miss from Chevy here, because you essentially have two useless switches here. You have the aux switch, which you technically can wire something up to, but this was built in for the Desert Boss because they had an optional light bar, and that's what would essentially hook up to. And then your 4 windows down, which I feel like if this was a 4 windows down and up, it would be useful, but you can't put the windows up altogether. So kind of a useless button. I even forget this button exists, because most of the time when I lower all 4 windows, I do it on the door. I feel like this could have been a physical traction control button because it's actually quite cumbersome to get through the menus. So in order to do that, you have to go to controls, and in controls, this is how you turn on and off your fog lights and your hill descent mode and a few other little accessories. You have to go to see more controls, and then in drive and park, and then there is your traction control. So you have to go to 3 separate menus in order to turn off traction control instead of just having a little button. Moving on to the next con, which is probably the biggest con and gripe that I have with this truck, and that is the axle gear ratio. Now these are 342s with a factory 33-inch tire and an optional factory 35-inch tire if you get the Bison. That is severely undergeared for the amount of tire you have. I don't think that's entirely Chevy's fault, because what the price point of this truck starts at, you have to cut corners somewhere, and I feel like that's where Chevy cut that corner, because these are the same axles from the previous generation ZR2, which came factory with 31s. You do notice it a little bit off-roading when you're in low, for low and in first, you do notice that the gear ratio doesn't feel right, especially for the tire you have on it. But hopefully the aftermarket will soon have options and upgrades, and that eventually is definitely going to be an upgrade for this ZR2. Our last con that we have with this truck is this exhaust. And no, it's not the sound or tone of the exhaust. My problem is how low this exhaust hangs. This is an advertised off-roading truck. Why can't they have a high clearance exhaust? Kind of like the Ranger Raptors that are integrated into the rear bumper that are much higher up. This exhaust has scraped and hit so many rocks already. I'm surprised it hasn't pancaked or ripped off. This is definitely a mod that is coming soon with a high clearance exhaust, but this is, I feel like, a big miss from Chevy from not making some type of high clearance exhaust for your ZR2 and ZR2 Bisons. Going into the issues we've had with this truck, and there's only 2. One of them being a little bit bigger, and that was originally I changed my own oil after 1,000 miles. That's just a thing I've always done. When breaking in a vehicle, I always change the oil, engine oil, after 1,000 miles. And while doing that, I got underneath the truck and I noticed that my passenger side CV axle was leaking. It was leaking grease everywhere. There was grease all up in the wheel well, and at that point I had not even gone off-roading with it. Now, this could have been a manufacturer defect. It also could have been damaged in transport, because this truck was transported. I actually bought it from a dealer in North Carolina, and it was transported all the way over here to Utah, so it could have possibly been damaged in transport. I'm not sure. Either way, took it to the local Chevy dealer and they warrantied it right away. Absolutely no issues. And so far, the rest of the 9,000 miles actually off-roading it and using it, I haven't had any issues with my CV axles. The last issue we've had in the 10,000 miles and 6 months is not a huge one, but it is, want to be full transparent here, it is an issue we've had, and that is we go to start the truck after it's been off, and the whole dashboard and instrument cluster turns from imperial to metric. And so everything's in Celsius and kilometers, and didn't change anything in the settings. And the only way I found to fix this is you have to go into these settings here, and it would show you it's in US units, but it's actually displaying metric. So you'd have to click on metric, then go back to US units, and it fixes itself. Now this has only happened to us in about 2 to 3 times, so it's very infrequent and doesn't happen often, but it is something to be aware of that we've had an issue with. A bonus little question that I get all the time, some of you may or may not know, I used to own an off-road, a Gen 5 Ranger on 35s, and I always get the question, is the ZR2 worth it? Well, now after 6 months of ownership and 10,000 miles, I can easily say it's worth every penny and it's worth the upgrade. This truck performs on-road fantastic and off-road fantastic. Yeah, it has its little issues and its little quirks, as every truck does, but the amount of issues I've had with this truck, and being a first-year truck owner, which typically your first year is problematic, the truck's done very, very well. I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. If you guys aren't, make sure to go check out my other videos of us actually using this truck off-road, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.